Welcome to Soülfööď with Héĺľen weekly conversations, a safe space, a non-judgmental space. And if I say a safe space, I mean a space where we embrace one another, where we accept one another for who we are, where we hold space for one another and remind each other that no matter where you are, no matter what you are going through in your journey, you are not alone. This platform is a safe haven for sharing the food for the soul, where we talk about the mindset, spirituality, and healing. Today, I have with me a very special guest. With me, Eric Richardson, who is here to empower us, encourage us, educate us on this critical topic that we've been sharing for the past month called mental health awareness. Welcome to our platform, Eric. I'm so humbled to have you here. I know you. I know you charge a lot of money to speak for 30 minutes or 1 hour. So I'm truly humbled to have you here on our platform. So would you kindly introduce yourself to our audience?
Of course. So as you say, Héĺľen, I have expertise in a number of different areas, but my background is predominantly within education and more recently within spiritual education and working across a range of different techniques, most importantly ThetaHealing, which works with the subconscious mind. So I'm very interested in helping people to really fulfill their dreams, to find out what's blocking them from fulfilling their dreams and helping them to shift those blocks. Oftentimes they're just energetic blocks, and we can shift them using the Theta Healing technique, for example. But essentially I work as a healer and as a teacher. But all the work that I do currently is always acknowledging that there's a bigger picture and there's a higher truth. And so I also work a lot with gender and sexual diversity, because of course a lot of the systems that are currently in place create problems for people, where they might encounter, certain stigma, labeling, harassment, bullying, and of course that's also going to affect a person's well-being and the way that they interact with others. So in a nutshell, that's who I am, and I basically like to do whatever my soul wants me to do.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. There is nothing so fulfilling like what you are saying. You love to follow what your soul wants, and I feel like there is nothing so fulfilling in life than following your soul, and I believe that's why we are here on earth, to follow and align with our soul and fulfill our highest, truest version of ourselves. That's beautiful. Thank you so much. So would you kindly maybe explain to us what is mental health, and how does a person get to a place where they realize that in this moment I think I have mental health issues? How do I tell that in this space this is a mental health disorder?
Thank you. So, Héĺľen, I'm going to speak from two different perspectives. So the one perspective is as someone who knows people who have actually experienced mental health challenges, and then also from the perspective of someone who's researched the topic for some of the courses that I teach. So I'm talking from those two perspectives. The one's very personal, and the other one is obviously much more based in research. So I think from the outset, it's really important as someone who is a healer, stroke teacher, stroke learner, because I think that's also why I'm on the planet, is to learn and evolve and grow. It's to acknowledge that I am not in any way equipped to diagnose someone as having a mental health issue. Okay, I think it's in fact key as a healer that we try not to allow people to label themselves in any way. And even if they do come and work with us and they say to us that they have a mental health issue, to some extent that diagnosis is irrelevant because we want to find out what's causing it. Okay, so just to say we don't diagnose, but I mean the question is, how do people actually know that there's something wrong? And I think there's a big difference here between being mentally unwell and being sad. A lot of people, you know, that have spoken to me over the years have said that they're feeling really down, they're feeling really depressed, they're feeling sad. And when you begin to talk to them, it's almost as though some people label themselves depressed way too quickly. And they're not actually depressed, okay? And so I suspect that there's some kind of a continuum, and somewhere along the continuum include emotions like worry and anger, you know, sadness, fear, feeling on edge, you know, difficulty concentrating. All of that could happen to a person because they're suffering from stress, or because they've been recently bereaved. They might be encountering grief. You know, they might have had a breakup in a marriage, for example. So it's one of those big traumatic experiences that could actually be leading them to feel quite emotionally unwell. But that's not necessarily the same thing as like a mental illness per se. Mental illness, in my understanding, is no different than recognizing you could have an illness in your body. And so based on, you know, my experiences with people who've been mentally unwell, be it depression, be it schizophrenia, be it bipolar, whatever, all right, is that it's a bit like saying that they have a problem with their liver, or they have a problem with their kidney, they have a problem with their brain, all right, and how their brain operates. Previously, I've had a conversation with a psychologist when I said to them, why is it not called a brain illness? You know, like, why is it called a mental illness? And I think that's where it gets so complicated, Héĺľen, because some people are suffering from a mental illness and they can be treated through psychology and some of the other things that we might talk about a bit later. And then others have a mental illness that requires psychiatry, you know, and it seems to be much more rooted in biology, in a person's genetics. And they may, you know, some people even believe that they've inherited a mental illness. So I guess what I'm also saying is that because people tend to say, I am depressed, when in actual fact they aren't, we don't necessarily have the best understanding in society of what depression is. The opposite is actually also true, in the sense that some people say they are depressed and then we tell them to snap out of it. You know, like, you must just decide that you're going to be happy, or you're just going to decide that you no longer have delusions or schizophrenia or paranoia, or, you know, whatever it happens to be. And that's the illness part. I don't say to someone, snap out of bronchitis. You know, I don't say to them when you've got a flu, oh, Héĺľen, snap out of the flu. You know, so my understanding is that these things really result in a very deep, for want of a better word, a deep level of pain and hurt and suffering for the person who is experiencing a mental health issue. So that's kind of in a nutshell how I'm thinking about mental illness at the moment.
Oh, wow, thank you so much. Yeah, I think you have clarified it clearly, where you're saying there is a difference between being depressed and being sad. And it reminded me of an incident today where I went to the mall. So there's this lady works where I went to get some services, and we always laugh whenever we meet and stuff. And she was like, I asked her, "What's up? How was your Black Friday? What did you buy?" And she was like, "Héḻen, things are not okay. I haven't been on my feet since lockdown. I'm behind with rent. I'm behind with everything. I owe shops." And I said, maybe it's just your beliefs. Maybe you need to revise your beliefs about money. And she started laughing, and she actually mentioned that when I started speaking about, about some uplifting stuff, and she was like, "Héḻen, where were you? You know what? I cry every day, and I feel like I'm depressed." The conversation turned from being the light one, the light-hearted moment, to being a serious, emotional, where I could actually, she was at her workspace, but I could actually see tears in her eyes.
Exactly.
So I would
just to jump in there, and I mean, I think that's something that we as a society really need to recognize, is that, as I mentioned just now, some people have like a depression that seems to be based in biology. It seems to be something that is an illness or a disease in the same way that it could be, like a person, as I mentioned, could have a problem with their liver or their kidneys. But there seems to be another kind of mental health issue at the moment, primarily because of what's happened on the planet. And that is just also to recognize that some people who, for all intents and purposes, have been really well and have experienced a tremendous amount of well-being. And so there's absolutely no sign that they could suffer from a mental health issue, end up having a mental health issue because of a trigger. And something happens in their life which is extremely traumatic. And we've seen that this year with a lot of people who, I don't think they suspected that they had mental health issues because they've never seen the signs before, but because they were suddenly deprived of everything that made sense to them, or they were suddenly deprived of their jobs and they were stuck in their homes and, confronting gender-based violence and all of these things that basically made them feel powerless. That also seems to be a trigger for some people that quite potentially can affect the brain. So it's always, for me, it's always important as a healer to recognize like these two cases. The one that might actually just be going through a really bad period and a lot of trauma, and they need some healing relating to that. And then others who've always felt like they're mentally unwell, like there's something wrong with them, ever since they were really, really young. They might describe that they've suffered from, sleep issues or addiction or feeling completely alone and unhappy and miserable and negative. I hope I'm clarifying what I mean. But there's a certain degree of compassion that society needs to have towards people, with mental health issues, whether it's being caused by trauma or biology. To me, it's almost irrelevant. But at the same time, not to play with the words. And, if words are so powerful and what we speak can potentially happen in our lives, then it's really unfortunate that people say things like, "Oh, I am depressed," because it could become a self-fulfilling prophecy. No, you're not depressed. I've heard a teenager recently say to me that she was depressed because she couldn't get the latest cell phone. That's not depression. That's just a use of a word. But is she talking it into existence? As a spiritual healer, I'm very conscious of the way in which energy solidifies. And if we keep focusing our energy on a particular stance and a particular label, a particular way of being, maybe in time, that's who we become, And it's what you said about the belief program. If people believe that they are unwell, then chances are they might fulfill that as a prophecy, and become unwell.
Yes. And I think the reason why we as people, we get so stuck in the old story of things not going well the way we want is because it's like a comfort zone. We don't know of anything beyond that. So when you start talking about, releasing the old beliefs, like starting the new programming of the subconscious mind, it's scary. It's like a horror movie. We have never lived that space before. So it's really difficult to convince someone that there is a life, a beautiful life beyond this veil that you are
And that's
putting
the
on.
question. I mean, that's the question, Héĺľen. You know, like from a ThetaHealing perspective, if the person has been diagnosed as having a mental health issue, then we need to recognize that they have an illness. Okay? But what was going on in their lives when this illness started? You know, was it caused by trauma? Was it caused by abuse? You know, what was it that actually resulted in that trigger, if you like, that first trigger that, you know, led towards mental health? And I've spoken a little bit about depression because that seems to be the one that's on the increase currently, especially with the pandemic. But of course, you know, if you were talking to a psychiatrist, they could give you probably 200-300 different kinds of mental illness. So what's the root cause of that? And something else I just also wanted to mention, I think that we've seen on the planet now, is people are depressed because they're having an existential crisis. So I don't know about you, Héĺľen, but in my training, I learned philosophy, and in fact, I taught philosophy for a while, and it's probably why I like speaking, because I love kind of talking about everything and debating and dialoguing. You know, that's the philosopher in me. But in philosophy, there's this notion of having an existential crisis, and recognizing that for some people, they reach a point in their lives where they say, well, why am I alive? You know, what is my purpose? What is the point of all of this? And that for some people it's a very deep conversation, and they can't get the answers, you know. And so also when I think about mental health, I am tempted sometimes to wonder, is the person going through some kind of dark night of the soul? You know, are they going through some kind of conflict around existing and being on Earth during, you know, what feels like a really difficult period for a lot of people?
Yeah.
I'm just throwing it up there, Héĺľen, because I think, you know, your viewers need to be aware that it's complex, isn't it? This whole mental health. Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
And the dark night of the soul is like a spiritual mental health issue. You know, it's like at the soul level, whereas the ego maybe has like a psychological mental health issue. I don't know.
And now that you have mentioned the issue of the dark night of the soul, it's like you're talking about that moment when you reach the rock bottom. You're just closed. You don't know where to turn to. You don't know what to do. You don't know who to talk to. So in that space, what would you tell someone who's going through that dark night of the soul, to try to convince them, like in the space of how does taking personal responsibility relates to dark night of the soul, like those mental health issues?
Right. So I've been through the dark night of the soul, okay, personally. So I understand what it's like. And prior to experiencing the dark night of the soul, I had encountered lots of people who had suffered from depression and so on. And I said to the universe at some stage, oh, I wonder what it's like. Like, I really don't understand this. And I think I manifested it in some way so that I would develop understanding. But when I was going through the dark night of the soul, for me, I felt like I'd left the planet, to be honest with you, Héĺľen. It felt to me like I was just a shell, and that it was just my ego. And my ego was terrified because it felt like my soul wasn't quite in body. And I think that we underestimate how important having the soul in our body actually is. Like, without that soul energy and the kind of the connection between the mind, body, and spirit, we're at a loss. And so for me, the dark night of the soul felt very lonely. What I really appreciated from the people who were with me through that experience was that they came into where I was at, okay? They, almost as though I was an autistic child. You know, with the autistic children, they say that you must always kind of go into their world. And the people that helped me through that experience, they came into my world and they were just there for me. They didn't try and change me. Okay, they didn't try and say things, like snap out of it. But they did encourage me. But it was very much 10 seconds at a time. All right, it was that severe for me, Héḻen, that it felt like you couldn't say to me anything about tomorrow because tomorrow was too far away. The most you could talk to me about was the next 10 minutes. Okay. At my worst, Héḻen, I could get out of bed and I could color a picture for about half an hour and then I would get back into bed. And that was my accomplishment for the day. Okay. When I look back on it now, what I really think people who are experiencing that are yearning for is healing of the original wound. And what I mean by the original wound is that a lot of people who go through that kind of existential crisis or the dark night of the soul, they suddenly have this experience where they feel like God has abandoned them. And you can actually literally trace it back to when that soul was created. There was a time when your soul didn't exist. If you can think about it, there was a time when the Creator created you. Okay. But your energy, if you like, comes from source energy. You are a spark of the divine. And I think sometimes before we incarnate on the planet, we know what it feels like to be with God, to be one with God. Like we come from a beautiful place, if you like. Like wherever souls are birthed is a beautiful place. That's my understanding. And some might say that's my belief program, but it's a convenient belief for me because it feels nice. It resonates for me. But then you come to the planet, and the planet can feel really hard. Okay. And a lot of people, they've spent years trying to achieve what it is that they want. And unfortunately, Héḻen, so much of what we want is not actually what we really want. It's what we've been programmed to believe we want. So people spend years and years trying to get the house of their dreams, right? Or they try and, get the car of their dreams or whatever. And just reflecting on my own experience, when those things were taken from me, okay, I don't want to use the word taken because it's kind of stolen, but it wasn't stolen. But when I was without a house all of a sudden, and I had owned a house previously, that sense of loss was really, really deep for me, okay? So deep that when I went into it, I was feeling feelings of lost, actually being lost. And as I say, I could even trace it within myself back to, why am I on the planet? Was I put here by God against my will, or was I involved in making some kind of choice in order to incarnate on the planet? Either way, that dark night of the soul really feels like you're alone and you're lost. I mean, that's the darkness. And so if you're trying to help someone through that, I really feel like you can only just be there for them. Just be there for them. Just hold them. Just hold space for them. Have compassion for them. And send them as much unconditional love as you possibly can. But if you can keep your light, and if you can continue radiating your soul, that seems to ignite within the other person a sense of hopefulness. So if I was working with a client who was experiencing this dark night of the soul, or even a deep depression, or just worry, anger, stress, whatever, part of my mission within a session with the client would be to restore hopefulness. That maybe it's not so great now, for whatever reason. Maybe you're feeling abandoned by God now. Maybe you're feeling, like betrayed by your friends and your family now. And that is the source of your pain. And we can honor that pain. All right. But imagine if you could create your reality a little bit different in the next 10 minutes. And it really does amount, in my mind, to like one step at a time. Héḻen, I don't know if you know the work of Abraham Hicks. But Abraham Hicks,
yes,
yeah, you do. So they talk
I
about
love
the emotional ladder. Yeah, they talk about the emotional ladder, and I find that's a really useful tool, you know, as we reflect on these issues, because some people, they come for a healing and they say, oh, I'm mentally unwell, please heal me. And you've got to take one step at a time. You know, I'm not saying miracles aren't possible. Miracles are absolutely possible. But there's a lot of pain. You know, there are a lot of emotions. There are a lot of belief programs that have prevented a person from healing and have kept them in a space of darkness or whatever it is. And you have to deal delicately with them and tread lightly. And you can't just bulldoze in and you know, like fix them. They're not broken. It's just a change of perception that's needed.
yes.
There's a consciousness that's needed. There are wounds, and those wounds need healing.
Yes, very true. But how did we get to this place where instead of being internally driven, focusing on our growth, evolving of our soul, where we embrace our journey and take our experiences as lessons rather than life fighting us? How did we get to a space where we focus on our validational metrics of our worthiness is money, is your social status, how famous you are. How did we get to this space? Because I feel like that's the greatest source of pain and emotional trauma, trying to prove to ourselves, I'm the one with many followers, I'm the one with more money, I'm the one who's, you know, all those materialistic things that we focus on. So as well, the second part is, how do we heal from the mental health disorder that comes through those external pressures?
Wow, Helen, hey, this is a conversation we could have for days. I don't know if you know, Helen, but I created a one-day course for theta healers on mental health issues because it's something we need to think about, you know, and there's so much that we need to think about. I think what you're also indicating, Helen, shows how harmful capitalism has been. Okay. And I know others will say, oh, well, that's not entirely true, and socialism is dangerous as well, and that's fine, you know, blah, blah, fine. But it seems to me that quite often within a capitalist society, we've created a situation, maybe go one step back. There is more than enough abundance on this planet for everyone, right? But capitalism has created the illusion that there is scarcity. And it's created the illusion that you have to work really, really hard in order to earn income, in order to be happy, in order to succeed. And it's an illusion because a lot of my clients have everything, Helen. They have the beautiful house, the beautiful car, the wonderful spouse, and yet they still have depression. Okay? So even though they've nearly burned out and they've gone in that direction, they've ended up having to take medication and see a therapist, see a psychologist, see a psychiatrist, whatever it happens to be, an alternative healer, because none of those things actually give them what they thought it would give them. But in my mind, that's where we've gone wrong. We've allowed ourselves to be programmed to believe in scarcity. And it's created a situation where there's 10 people and only one job, right? And so you know immediately I'm applying for that job. I have to present myself in a particular way. I have to have particular qualifications. I have to have a particular personality, you know, or I won't get the job. And then when you get the job, you have to behave in a particular way so that you don't get warnings and end up being fired, right? So already you're in a situation, I think, where a lot of the symptoms relating to mental health issues apply. A lot of the people are living from fear, or living in fear rather, that if they don't do their jobs properly, they're going to lose their jobs. And when they do lose their jobs, it's status, it's money, it's income, and they have no idea how to cope, you know. And oftentimes I say to people like that, well, what is it that you actually want? You know, what is it that you actually desire? What does the house mean to you? It's not the house that matters, it's what it means to you, you know? And I think part of what's happened as well, Héĺľen, just to answer your question, is maybe we've made meaning in very limiting ways. So we've tried to define success in a very material way, you know? I look at a homeless person who's happy, and there's a part of me that is reminded all the time of how beautiful that is. I'm not saying it's beautiful that they're homeless, but it's beautiful that you can be homeless and happy, that it's a possibility, you know? But then at the same time, we're aware of the fact that there are billionaires, millionaires who are not happy, and nothing is good enough for them. So maybe we've also just lost touch, I think, with self-love, self-acceptance, self-worth, knowing our true worth. And we've also maybe limited ourselves to some extent. You know, we forced ourselves to conform to a society that very often doesn't have our best interests at heart. But I'm going to be controversial for a moment, Héĺľen, and say we are society. We created society. We manifested this world. Why don't we manifest it differently? Why don't we manifest a world where we can come from love and heart consciousness? There's nothing wrong with money, you know, there's nothing wrong with it. There is more than enough money on this planet for every single person to be a millionaire. There's more than enough resources on this planet for everybody to eat. Why is there poverty, Héĺľen? You know, why is there malnutrition? Why is there gender-based violence? Why is there human trafficking? And, you know, when you begin to reflect on these, there seems to be a common theme. And that theme ties a lot in with power over other people, you know? And we talk about democracy. I mean, we live in South Africa and we talk about democracy. And quite often I think to myself, where's the democracy? You know, I've worked in government, Héĺľen. It was one of the most stressful situations in my life, I'll be honest with you. And I left government because it affected my mental health. I have never experienced people who knew so little about how to treat other people well. There was such a lack of emotional intelligence that it was actually disheartening to see. I looked at these people and I thought, but we're all equal. Why are you trying to dominate me? Why are you trying to prove that you're superior to me? You know? And it's what you said earlier. To me, that's a fragile ego. A fragile ego is the ego that feels it's not good enough, and so it keeps trying to prove to everybody that it is good enough. And let's not forget, Héĺľen, we've got lots of examples on the planet at the moment of people who are narcissistic, and narcissism is a mental health issue. So I don't know if I've answered your question. I might have missed the second part.
Very clearly, very clearly. And I love that you brought the topic of narcissism, because we actually have a live video on Friday with a lady who tells us her story of how she managed to come out of it and got the strength, and now she established her business. So it's a topic on its own, which is very, very relevant. Thank you for bringing that up. I think in essence, as human beings, we have forgotten totally who we are. We are lost. We don't even know what we are doing here on earth. It's like we are trying to figure out, and we are going through life like blindfolded, and we are not open to seeing things differently. It's like we are comfortable in that dark, painful, traumatic space. It's like we're okay with our pain, and we are not embracing the message that you just spoke about. Like, it's not about the material things in the material sense. Like, there are actually rich people, billionaires, millionaires, who are actually depressed, who are actually having mental health issues. And I think we need to come to a space where we remember that it's not all that matters. So coming to the next question, how do we as society get to the space of holding space for one another? How can we contribute to a better world for someone who's going through the darkest moments in their lives? Like you said, dark night of the soul. How do I approach that person?
Yes, and also to say, I mean, not every mental illness is necessarily a dark night of the soul, but obviously it's very complex. I think, Héĺľen, for me, one of the most important things really is compassion. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, recognizing that mental health is real, recognizing that I don't tell people to snap out of an illness. So why would I tell them to just put on a happy face? Recognizing that it's really not helpful to say to someone who is mentally unwell that they must just get better. Okay? That is part of the stigma. It's as though society and a lot of people in society, they don't really want to recognize the links between society and the individual. But a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, a lot of mental health issues, as we've said, are because society is not functioning well. In my mind, Héĺľen, if we could get society functioning a lot better, then we would see a lot of the individuals within that society functioning a lot better. I mean, let me just give you an example, all right? And it's a very obvious example. But say you are someone who has to now go to a department within the government for paperwork. Okay, so maybe you have to go to Home Affairs. And you go to Home Affairs and you get there at the crack of dawn, and now there's a queue. And you stand in the queue, and by the time you get to the front of the queue, the system is offline. Okay? But you know that you have to get your ID book, reissued because it was stolen. And until you've got your ID book reissued, you're not going to be able to get married or whatever it happens to be. Someone who's suffering from mental health issues, if they're not being medicated, if they're not being treated, if they're not in a space of awareness, okay, where they can actually say, what is going on with me now? Is something affecting my health? Is this affecting my blood pressure? Is adrenaline kicking in? Am I getting stressed by this? That person is going to experience that situation in a very overwhelming way because nothing functions properly and they've not been able to get a goal met, right? And for a lot of people, that sounds like, well, it's just, you didn't get your ID book. But if you're suffering from a mental health issue, that could be really the last straw, because really you want things just to work. You want things to work well. So I often think that if the systems just work better, maybe we could just see an improvement in how people interact in those systems. But you mentioned it just now. So many of the systems that we see on the planet at the moment have forgotten who we truly are. They're based in fear. They create anxiety. They create stress. They create huge difficulties for people. They're very wounding. We've got systems on the world at the moment that are extremely negative, that are preventing people from being in alignment with soul, with spirituality. That actually is quite wounding, I mean, I just think of a lot of the wounds like rejection and abandonment and betrayal and injustice. And again, just to say, Héĺľen, we say to men during the 16 days of activism, for example, that they mustn't abuse women. There's no research anywhere to tell us that you can just tell someone to stop bad behavior. There is a lot of relearning that is needed. And that's why I like something like ThetaHealing, because ThetaHealing gives us an opportunity to reprogram the subconscious mind, but to do it in a way which incorporates God, incorporates source energy and the alignment with your soul again. And the alignment with your soul is a recognition that there isn't this judgment that we're putting on ourselves all the time to be better is not helpful. We are enough. We are wonderful beings, and we just got to start working on ourselves and on our belief programs so that we can clear these negative energies, clear these limiting beliefs, and learn to love ourselves and respect ourselves and each other again. But as I say, that requires relearning, Helen. I get so annoyed when people say to me, oh, that you should just not drink and drive, for example, or you shouldn't hit a woman. That isn't engaging deeply enough with a belief program around what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be masculine? Why do people drink? We haven't mentioned it much today, but a lot of people who are suffering from mental health end up being addicts of something because they can't deal with the pain, and they're trying to avoid the pain. And I think you mentioned something about that just now, Helen, where you said, it's not about avoiding the pain. I think what we most fear, is going to persist if we keep resisting looking at it. You know what I mean? And so as part of our healing, as part of our society, creating a space for people, it's conversations like this that are really, really useful, because people need to acknowledge and admit right now that there are a lot of people on this planet that are struggling to connect with others. They are struggling to make meaning. They think they're alone. They think they're the only one. They may be suicidal, for example. Please minimize the pain that they are going through. Don't say to somebody, oh, you're just trying to get attention. It's a really hurtful thing to say to someone. If you had a broken leg, Helen, would I say to you, oh, well, you broke your leg because you're trying to get attention? There's something much more going on. There's a root cause there. What is the root cause? What is the root issue? What is the source of pain? And can we create healthier belief programs, healthier feelings, better feeling thoughts, and actually a better functioning society? This pandemic really has given us an opportunity, if you think about it, to revisit humanity completely. And I wonder sometimes if we've done that. Why haven't we had a big conference in South Africa, where everyone could have come together with the politicians and envisioned a whole new South Africa? What do we want South Africa to look like in 2021? And allow people to be creative, allow people to be idealistic, allow people to let their imaginations run wild. Why can't we imagine a world in which people are all healthy and happy and abundant and not worrying for their lives and for their safety? Why can't we create that kind of world? We made this world the way it is, Helen. And the increase that we've seen in mental health is not because more people are necessarily vulnerable to mental health issues. It's just because the world has got so toxic for so many sensitive people that they don't know how to cope anymore. And so maybe we also need a big campaign in teaching people how to cope and how to be resilient and, how to actually deal with the things that matter.
Let's do this, Eric. This is
the... Helen, I'm just speaking off the cuff, but I don't understand why we still want people to think that it's okay to suffer. We don't have to suffer, people. We don't have to be in pain. We don't have to prove anything to anyone. We can be healthy, we can be happy, and we can even find out through a range of different techniques why we're on the planet. What are we doing here at this time? What did you sign up for? It's almost like an advert went out and the advert said, oh, Earth needs. And you were like, oh, I'll be there. I'm applying for that job. I think what you said just now is we've forgotten what our real purpose for being on the planet is. Maybe we've forgotten what our job is. Okay, I feel blessed because I know my job is to teach. And I love teaching, and I love helping people and witnessing healing. But a lot of people I'm going to be honest with you, are in jobs that they really don't want to be in, Héḻen. They would be much happier if they could just be not a boss, but they become a boss because that's the only way they feel they're going to earn money. You know, I think of friends of mine who are brilliant teachers in schools, and then they become school principals because that's the only way they can get the money that pays for the lifestyle that they would like to have. And then they don't teach, and then they get miserable. And they're miserable because, once again, they're out of alignment with soul, you know? And then they're having all the expectations of the parents, and then they're having problems with the children. And before long, they're having to take medication in order just to cope with life again, you know? And then you have to stop and you have to say, well, why don't you just do what you came to the planet to do? Why are we so extrinsically motivated? Why are we always seeking something else? You know, somebody said to me once, Héḻen, the grass is greener on the other side because there's much more poo there, you know? Maybe it's worth thinking about.
Yes, very true. Wow. The truth is the truth, and sometimes the truth will hurt sometimes. I think everything is taking us back to reprogramming the subconscious mind. I think, I don't know, whatever it is, the subconscious mind of all humanity on a global consciousness, I think it's rotten.
Yeah,
and I think to paint new picture.
Héḻen, I think maybe through this period now, because of COVID-19 and, you know, so much going on the planet, maybe a lot of people are actually clearing their blocks at the moment. Maybe they're opening their eyes and seeing the world differently. You know, and even if they aren't, I think there is a shift in consciousness and that people are asking really important questions. You know, in the last year, we've had psychologists say that we can no longer blame the individual for mental health issues, that we actually have to look at society and we have to say to what extent is society contributing to the problem. To me, that's a breakthrough, hey, because in the past, they never went there. They never recognized that, you know, the collective consciousness is unwell and the collective consciousness needs healing as well.
Yes, very true.
We all need self-care, you know, and it's not selfish, Héḻen. Look after yourself. That's not selfish. It's necessary.
Yeah, especially times like this. It's really necessary. I think conversations like this, we need to keep going. And I think the topic that you just mentioned of reprogramming the subconscious mind is something that we may want you back on the show as well, maybe to clearly elaborate so people learn. Because I remember I wrote, someone wrote to me, like I have a chat group on WhatsApp where I usually engage with people, send inspirational stuff. So some people then inbox me asking for advice in certain situations. So I wrote something about the subconscious mind, and I remember she then asked me, what is subconscious mind? Then I said the unconscious part of you. And she was like, what's the unconscious part? So I think conversations like this, they are necessary.
And I think, Héḻen, just to say, I mean, it's really important. We are aspects of divine. You know, we are aspects of God. We have the source energy within us. Everything is energy. And there is no being sitting up there saying, you know, in answer to your prayer, no, I won't heal you. My understanding is that we are receiving healing and unconditional love from God all the time. It is actually our subconscious mind that blocks us from receiving the healing. It's our subconscious mind that prevents source energy from flowing freely through our bodies, you know. And I think that also if we as a society can recognize that as we change our belief programs, as we lift limiting belief programs and we choose better feeling beliefs and better feeling thoughts and so on, as we do that, there is a physical impact in the body, you know, because a belief program could actually result in you being terrified all the time. Just think, for an example, of a spider. I mean, a person who has a phobia of a spider, every time they see a spider, their heart rate's going to go up. But if you do the healing and you change the belief programs that are behind the phobia, if you dig beneath it and you reduce the fear, through energy healing, some people might do it through talk therapy, the next time they see a spider, it won't be so scary, and it's not actually going to have a physical impact on their body. They're not going to suddenly go into like a high adrenaline or, some kind of fight mechanism. And I think that's also something we're seeing, Helen. So a lot of people, they get stuck in this adrenal fatigue. And adrenal fatigue means that they are just so tired of having to fight, or flee from negative situations, that they actually can no longer function properly. And a lot of those people are exhausted, and I think there is definitely a link between exhaustion and mental health. I mean, I read one that a lot of people who are depressed just need deep rest. And I remember thinking, wow, because, it's what we said earlier, maybe the soul also gets tired. And I sometimes think to myself, there's so many wonderful workshops. I mean, you obviously know about a few of them, and, you've done a few of them. But we as adults often think that's not for us, and we don't enroll on these workshops. And actually, we're blessed because we're on the planet at a time when there is so much available to help us move into alignment with who we truly are. There's so many different techniques. There's so many different healing modalities. A person can use crystals, learn how to use crystals to help cope with depression, for example. But you've got to be open to it, and you've got to recognize that you can stay on medication if you're on medication, but that there are other ways in which you can also find meaning and make meaning and purpose. But if you've got stubborn programs, my last comment for the moment, Helen, but if you've got stubborn programs, then you end up saying things like, oh, well, I can't change. That's just a belief program. We can all change. We can all improve. We can all evolve. We are wounded beings who are learning how to heal. That's what we're all doing. And we're all on a journey back home,
Yes.
And I don't know, I have a feeling that it would be really nice for all of us at some stage to recognize that it's okay to get our emotional needs met. We don't have to be spiteful. We don't have to be greedy. We don't have to be selfish. It's okay for you to shine brightly, and it's okay for everybody else to shine brightly. And maybe this love of power and greed that we see on society, in society and in certain sectors, will start to diminish as more and more people become conscious, and more people say, I won't be attached to that. I'm not going to play that game anymore. I'm not going to just stroke your ego because you're my boss. In actual fact, your boss is a narcissist, who really should be on treatment for their narcissism. But I think also just to acknowledge, Helen, that, all of us have issues, and that's okay. But what are we doing to help ourselves heal? What are we open to exploring? What are we open to reading? And if we take it seriously enough, I think that we would do just about anything. If I'm hungry, I'll do just about anything to eat. And it's what you said earlier. If you don't like being in pain, try something to get out of the pain, right? But find out what was causing the pain to start. Treating the symptoms all the time is just not enough. We've got to get to the root cause. And that to me is where ThetaHealing, works, because we're looking at belief programs. And they're in the subconscious mind, and it's about 90% of who you are. And it works with the laws of the universe to help create your reality, your attitude, your behavior, and your physiology. It's really important to recognize your beliefs affect your health.
Wow, I love that part of saying I'm no longer playing this game. What I hear you saying is it's time for us to come to a place where we say, I'm done.
Yes.
I'm done, and I'm ready to release the old me. And I think, Eric, from the bottom of my heart, that's the space where I am, or that's where I'm trying to reach. That point. I wouldn't say I'm fully there, but I'm taking whatever way that can lead me to that space to say, what, those old belief programs of blaming other people, blaming politics, blaming economy. It's no longer working. We can't keep on oscillating on the same, old rotten stuff. It's time to stand in our truth and claim our what is ours. Like you said, there is great abundance. I love that. Oh my God.
There is great abundance.
Oh my God, that's beautiful. I wish, those conversations or those kind of messages would be made available, like from children, from primary level. Like programming the kids with this truth: you are abundant, you are enough, you are loved, you are with. We didn't grow up hearing this. It's like they're waking up. I'm turning 30 and I'm
it ties in with the work that I do in gender and sexuality, because so many women, have actually held themselves back because of patriarchy, because they're so terrified of disappointing the man. I had a client just the other day who said to me that her biggest concern at the moment is that she has the belief program that her purpose on the planet is to serve the man. And I was like, oh my word, in 2020, her belief program is that she's here to serve the man. And she said to me, I can't do it. I'm not prepared to do it. I am here to make myself happy, and it's okay. And we did the work that needed to be done. But it's interesting how we've also been expected to fit these awful boxes, hey? Because you're a woman, you're supposed to behave a particular way. And if you don't behave that way, it can also result in quite a lot of turmoil for you, because others might try and force you to behave a particular way. And that's actually also quite sad that in 2020, we still feel that we need to tell people how to be, So long as people are not harming other people, so long as they're respecting free will, why can't people just be authentically who they are, And if Héĺľen wants to be a little bit masculine, or Eric wants to be a little bit feminine, or whatever, so what? What is the big issue? Why do we feel that we need to maintain some weird hierarchy? And I think that's what I'm saying, Héĺľen. I think a lot of what we're seeing on the planet now is that people are not prepared to play that game. They're just not prepared to keep on reinforcing the hierarchy, And they're beginning to own up to the fact that we are magnificent beings of the light. We are connected to God. We are always connected to God. We cannot be separate from God. If we think we're separate from God, then we must do the belief work. The belief programs are coming up for us around fear about being connected to God and what that might mean. And maybe we also need to do some work around God, because maybe we've also got quite the wrong idea about God. We still have this weird picture about God sitting on some throne somewhere and punishing you. Someone said to me the other day they've got depression because God's punishing them. I was like, no, that's just what you believe, but it's not the highest truth. What is the highest truth? Those are the questions that I think we need to ask. What is the highest truth? Who is God really? For me, God is unconditional love. God is the creator of all that is. Okay, and there's no battle that God's not winning. God's not part of the spiritual battle. If there's a spiritual battle going on, it's not happening at the level of the divine, the Godhead, the source. It's happening with the spiritual beings that God created. They may be having a spiritual battle. And I mention that, Héĺľen, because I also think that some people who are suffering from depression may be attacked, on an energy level. And so it's also important, or not just depression, but any mental illness, it's also important to recognize, entities, waywards, fallen, those kinds of energetic beings. They can attach themselves to people who are not coping mentally, And so sometimes traditional medicine is not enough. You might need to see a spiritual healer just to make sure that you can get also released from those attachments, so to speak. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, very much. And I think there is a new way or a new approach that we need to embody as humans of understanding who God is, like you just said. It's like, like I'm telling you, Eric, I'm only learning to realize that, you know, I'm the beloved child of God. God loves me as I am. I always had this belief system that there's something wrong with me. You know, I'm not living up to what God wants me. There's something. Hence, it led to high levels of low self-esteem. And if I say low self-esteem, I don't think there is anyone who identifies with low self-esteem the way I did. It sabotaged my whole life, and it's the most painful thing that I wouldn't wish for anyone. Not believing in yourself, not loving yourself. So you end up asking yourself, why am I here? What am I doing? Like, self-care to lead you to those magnitudes. So I think it is necessary maybe to normalize these conversations of talking about God from a spiritual point of view, not religious, because we end up fighting. I'm Muslim, I'm Christian, I'm what? Because
exactly, not needed. Those arguments are not needed.
Yes, very true. And you also talked about something, an interesting point about the woman, your client, who spoke about, you know, I'm here to save my husband. And I think there is a misconception, like how we're programmed to believe that we as women, we are below. So there is a bit of confusion of putting ourselves down, suppressing ourselves, you know, bottling our emotions, you know, silencing ourselves, failing to develop the wings to bloom. And you can still serve from that space of embracing your divine femininity. So that's a very interesting thing that you mentioned. And I hope next time we'll be able to dive deep into those conversations. It may benefit a lot of women. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think we are coming to the end of. Oh, it's already an hour. Oh my God!
I can't believe it, Héḻen, but you know me, I talk a lot, né?
I love how everything is flowing, and I love, you know, the way you speak. It's so eloquent, so elaborate. So, you know, it's like you speak to the soul in a way that everyone is able to resonate with, and I really appreciate that. So
everyone must have my YouTube channel, Héḻen. Go look at my YouTube channel.
You should put the link right below the live, so that even with your website, like the way that you do, so that our audience will be able to follow you and stuff. So I don't know what message or of wisdom would you want to leave our audience with?
The last thing that I would really want to say is forgive. Forgive yourselves if you have suffered. Forgive yourselves if you have gone through a period of pain and you felt completely abandoned by God, or you felt completely alone. Okay? It's okay. Don't beat yourselves up for not always being perfect. Don't beat yourselves up for not always being happy. It's okay. Forgive yourself. Let go of the resentments and the regrets, you know, and just allow yourself to take the next step and to move on one step at a time.
Can I breathe, Eric? You're making me so emotional, like in this moment. It's really powerful. Like, it's really relevant. You can continue.
Oh, that's it. That's my one bit of wisdom, Héḻen. That's it. And let's also just remember to eat right, play right, you know, move right. Because sometimes we forget that in the bigger picture. We get so caught up with all sorts of other things. You know, sometimes people say to me, oh, they've got insomnia, and then I find out they're drinking 10 cups of coffee. No, you don't have insomnia. You're drinking 10 cups of coffee. You know, so yeah, just remember what's really going on. Look after yourselves, look after your health, and don't necessarily always listen to other people. learn how to trust your own intuition and learn how to access highest truth, the wisdom from on high. Everyone can connect with Creator. Everyone can connect with Source. Everyone can feel well again. It's absolutely possible, That's it. That's all I want to say. But forgive others as well. Forgive others if they didn't help you through your dark night of the soul, or they didn't understand your mental health and they told you to snap out of it. Maybe they were doing the best they could. Maybe they didn't understand, and maybe they hadn't had a conversation around mental health, because as you've indicated, Héḻen, these conversations are not necessarily normal, and they should be normal. We need to normalize them. And we need to also recognize that it's okay to think outside the box. So imagine your world differently. If you could change one thing about your world, what would it be? And every single person who watches this at any stage needs to know what they're creating, what are they manifesting, and what kind of person do they want to become, and take responsibility for that. No blame, no shame, but just forgive and take the next step.
Wow. Yeah, this was deep, and thank you for also highlighting, I think at the beginning of the conversation, like it's okay to feel whatever you feel. It's okay for you to go through stuff. And I feel like when you're speaking about forgiving yourself, it's like an aha moment for me. It's like you spoke to my soul, and I was like, oh my God, let me allow myself to feel how I'm feeling in this moment. I'm feeling so emotional, and it's like you spoke to my soul, and I wish everyone would understand this. And one thing that I want my audience to know is, if you were listening, or if you watch a replay, I would want you to go back again to replay these empowering conversations. We were blessed today to have a man of wisdom who knows what he was speaking about. Like, Eric, you have got great wisdom that springs from your heart. And whenever you speak, it's like it's something opens up in someone's heart, that you'll be able to resonate with everything that you'll be saying. Like Soülfööď with Héḻen, it's like you speak to the soul, and we really appreciate so much. I'm so humbled. I think you can
invite me.
Sorry.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
You're always welcome. It's a pleasure to have you. It's an honor, a great honor to have you here. And I think you can actually feel the excitement in my heart.
Yes, I can.
As I speak, like I'm so grateful. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Those who have ears, they have heard. I think this is the time for us to go through life with an open mind, with an open heart, to embrace the new world. Like what you just mentioned, what Eric just mentioned, it's like a new world. We're getting in the new world, so it's time to embrace a new way of doing things, a new approach, a new allow yourself to understand things, concepts, different conversations, dialogues, without judgment, but with the willingness to learn. And the universe will conspire to add on top of what you already know. Like it's actually something that is so empowering. Like when I reflect on it, Eric, I'm not so well versed on these discussions of spirituality, wisdom. It's like I'm actually starting now, and I'm learning from you who have been along this path. And it's the way the universe is conspiring to deliver to me in a way that I'm open. Now it's like I'm open. What is it about life? What is it about abundance? What is that, So in as much as it's conspired to have Eric sit with me and say, I will not have a client session booked for this time, I'll give it to Héḻľen. That's the same way the universe will conspire to you to deliver the wisdom and the knowledge that you may want to know. So it's a great honor to have you. Thank you so much. So my hope is that with enough dialogue and engagement, we'll be able to reach a place where we enhance our mental resilience with time. And I hope and trust that through our dialogue and engagement with experts like Eric, we'll continue learning. And I really appreciate this moment, and I really appreciate our audience for tuning in. Till next week, we'll be back again with the same topic of mental health. Go ahead and speak, Eric.
And I just wanted to say, so thank you, Héḻľen, for creating this platform. And don't forget, anyone watching, Héḻľen is now a theta healer and she can take some clients. Yay! That's all.
Yes, I'm learning. I'm learning. I'm trying to understand what is it about, everything, because the journey is all about healing ourselves, letting go, releasing. So yeah, that's the opportunity that the universe is giving us to learn from the best like you, Eric. Thank you so much, guys. See you next time.
Everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.